Well, as everybody knows, magnetosphere-ionosphere coupling is an enormous subject. We've heard just one or two aspects of it discussed today, and I'm going to discuss just really one or two other aspects, which leaves several hundred aspects completely untouched, and I hope some of these can come out in the later discussion. My talk is really confined to the situation taking place in the polar caps, in the vicinity of the polar caps. And it must therefore include solar wind coupling as well as simply magnetosphere-ionosphere coupling. And I'm sure I don't have to apologize for including the solar wind in this session. Disturbed conditions, which is the title of the session, implies a time-varying situation, and that the time-varying situation is an essential element of the whole process and will be our chief concern here. As I understand it, the role of one of the lecturers at this conference is to act part as a tutorial lecturer and partly as an agitator. And I'll try to do a little bit of both. I'll try to throw in some outrageous, controversial stuff, which I'm sure will bring Vitainus leaping to his feet, if no one else. The ultimate driving force I'm talking about, of course, is the momentum of the solar wind. I don't think anyone would argue with that. There's now accumulating evidence that the momentum of the solar wind, in order to be efficiently applied to the magnetosphere-ionosphere system, requires that field line reconnection take place. That is, you can have all the solar wind momentum you want in the absence of field line reconnection. Nothing much is going to happen. But once the field lines are reconnected so that we have a direct connection between the interplanetary field and the geomagnetic field, then effectively there's a path available for the momentum to enter the magnetosphere and drive the system. And the third little piece of evidence which helps in a way is in a recent study of polar cap magnetic records, Maezawa. I think this work's still unpublished, but it's on the verge of publication. Maezawa has, I think it is. I don't think Maezawa is here. People are beginning to find that reconnection is a very patchy process, that it's not something that takes place over a well-defined reconnection line on the day side of the magnetopause. And I think, again, intuitively, this is a reasonable sort of thing to expect. Reconnection is a thing that I feel the magnetosheath plasma would rather not do if it can possibly avoid it. It's much easier for the plasma to simply slip around the flanks of the magnetosphere. This isn't nearly as elaborate as Walter Heikkela's diagrams, but it's it's enough to show the purpose, and I'll be showing it once or twice. The classical Axford-Hines type theory of convection with reconnection added to the picture, of course, involves a southward magnetic field in the usual picture, but of course it works with any orientation. With solar wind plasma being convected in here towards a stagnation point at which field line reconnection takes place, forming an instantaneous field topology like this, and these field lines then are carried by the solar wind back across the polar cap and downwards into the tail lobe region where they reconnect at a reconnection line here. And then the convection proceeds back in towards the Earth around the flanks of the magnetosphere and back out to the reconnection point on the day side. Now that's the simple picture, which I don't think people have too many objections to these days. It's something that probably goes on all the time and is part of the lore of the field, in a steady state at least. Well, now what happens when the field line reconnection rate changes in the vicinity of the dawn polar cusp region here? What happens first of all, of course, is that an Alfvén wave, or something like an Alfvén wave, is launched down the reconnected field lines, informing the plasma as it goes that there's a dE by dt accompanied with it, that the field is changing. And that excites a polarization current J, which is proportional to dE by dt. And the Lorentz force, J cross B, associated with that current, then starts to accelerate the plasma in the anti-solar direction to try to get it up to the new speed that the reconnection rate is demanding. Flux must be pulled out of the reconnection region at the same rate as it's being pushed in. Well, when this wave reaches the current, the dynamo region of the ionosphere, the Pedersen currents start to interfere with it, of course. And there's, well, in radio wave terminology, a mismatch occurs, and a reflected wave travels back up, telling the solar wind that it can't get going, and the solar wind should slow down. Well, the solar wind doesn't want to do that, of course. It's much more powerful, so it launches another wave back down, and there's a successive series of reflections of these waves until the whole thing reaches a steady state. And this whole picture was first analyzed by Hines and Story many years ago, back about 1958, in the course of a lengthy argument with Gene Parker in the pages of JGR.